Have you ever been in a situation where you hear about a band and you hear a few of their songs and you think, yeah, they're alright, I guess. But then they release a new album and everyone tells you that this new album is absolutely amazing and you decide to check it out for yourself and realize, holy shit, this is a good album. Well, that's exactly how I feel about this brand new kit that arrived at my doorstep yesterday. This is the C130H Hercules in 1:72 scale by the Russian kit manufacturer Zvezda, as you can see from the Cyrillic text at the top of the box here.
Американский военно-транспортный самолет.
This is actually only the third Zvezda kit that I've bought. The first was their Tupolev ANT-2 fighter, and yeah, that was alright, I guess. The second was their Sukhoi Su-30KN, which I actually just threw out a few days ago because I realised that I was never going to complete it, thanks to numerous frustrations including poor fit and raised panel lines. In other words, I've had mixed experiences with Zvezda. When I heard a few months ago that our pals in Russia were going to be releasing a new 1:72 scale C130, and then read the subsequent buzz in the online modelling community, of course I was quite interested. So, for the first time ever, I have purchased a kit hot off the production line. What we're going to do now is take a look inside the box, see what Zvezda have offered us, and then see how it compares to the competition. Here is the box. It opens up from the side there, which I think is quite a handy little feature. First of all, we have paint scheme and decal diagrams here. We've got whatever this is. Now here we have the instructions, and quite a handy little feature. I know it's a very minor point, but I really do like it when they put staples in here. One of my pet peeves is when I'm doing something very, very important and the pages of the instructions fall apart in my lap. So kudos to Zvezda for putting those in. Here we have the decals and the transparent pieces in the same little plastic bag. Very handy just to prevent them from being damaged in transit. And the parts here are in 3 separate plastic bags. And then at the very bottom of the box, we have the stencils. Now, looking from the instructions, I can already tell this is quite a detailed kit. Yeah, they've got some decals for the instrument panels there. In 1:72 scale, honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. Something that's not too common in modern kits is the fact that they give you crew members here. Unfortunately though, kind of like adding photo etch sets to aircraft like this, you're not going to see a whole lot once everything's sealed up. But nonetheless, there you go, you've got some crew members if you want. It actually progresses fairly standardly by model airplane standards. You've got the cockpit, and then you start adding more of the fuselage detail in there. And then once you've got all that sorted, then everything comes together. If this is to be believed, there's quite some good detail inside the fuselage there. Now this part here looks particularly interesting. To begin with, the fact that this centerpiece here is just one piece means that you're not going to have to do the whole puttying and sanding routine of the seam along there. Now this is probably going to be a little bit interesting to put together because it doesn't look like there's a lot holding these bits of the wing together. And keep in mind, these are not small wings, so it remains to be seen how easy or difficult that will be to put together. Here we have the construction of the 4 engines. And the fact that the engines have their own separate sprues here tells me that in the future, Zvezda are planning on releasing a C130J model. And this is important because the J model actually has very different engines to the H model. Of course, the rest of it seems fairly straightforward. Add all the little details at the end there. And then at the end here, you've got the optional air refueling probe for the RAF version of the Hercules, and you've just got a little bit of stencil detail down here. Let's start off with the cockpit-ish sprue here. Now here's the base of the cockpit. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad to me. Again, when we're talking 1:72 scale, it doesn't have to be overly detailed. Got a couple of the seats there. They don't look too bad at all. Those are crew members there, which are separated into separate bits, which is quite interesting. I guess it means you can put them in slightly different poses, unlike the older model kits where the pilots tend to just sort of have their hands resting in their laps. I'm looking at you, Airfix. One very slight problem we have is that these 2 pieces have fallen out. Must have just been a bit of rough handling in postage. We have some of the wheels there. Once again, in 72 scale, those look pretty decent. This is what I'm very excited for. As you can see, Zvezda have put quite a lot of attention to detail with the inside of the fuselage. Get those Nice little ribs there. You can see a bit of the padding around here, which would have been inside the actual aircraft. This was very clever on Zvezda's part. See, you've got these ejector pin marks here. Now, usually ejector pin marks are quite annoying to deal with, having to, usually have to put some sort of putty and then sand that over. But if you look at the instructions, they actually tell you to glue a separate piece in over where the ejector pin marks are. And these are the panels in question. If we look back at the instructions, you see that they want you to actually remove this little bit at the end here. And the fact that they've put these little dents in there means that should be quite easy. And what that tells me is that Zvezda are planning on releasing an updated version of this kit, which will be the C130H-30 model, which is actually a bit longer. So all in all, I'm quite impressed with this. As for the exterior, you can see they've got some very nicely molded recessed panel lines in here. They don't look too shallow, they don't look too pronounced, so that looks pretty good to my eye. You've also got some quite good detail in the wheel well there. Now might be a good time to go over the first problem that I've found with this kit, and that is with the sprues themselves. And I noticed this when I was looking for this part. As we can see, it's labeled H21. The problem is that the sprues themselves, they contain the numbers of the parts, but they don't actually contain the letters of which sprue you're looking at. Unfortunately, the only way to figure that out is to go back to the beginning of the instructions where they've got the nice diagram here. I mean, they do tell you, but it's still a bit annoying having to go back to the instructions all the time just to figure out what the hell sprue you're looking at. Here we have the transparent parts. These look pretty good, look pretty crisp there. My only concern is that with these parts here, the little details there are quite subtle. It might be a little bit difficult to mask off, whether I use masking tape or some sort of masking liquid. But that's really the only issue at the moment that I can see with these transparent parts. Let's look at the decal options now. This kit comes with 5 options, all from different countries. We've got the United States Air Force here. Pretty nifty thing they have here is for the paints, they have both the callouts for Zvezda's own range, but also Tamiya. That's quite handy because I've personally found that Tamiya paints are much more readily available in hobby stores. Well, at least in Australia, that seems to be the case. Now, you've got a couple of interesting different options here. You've got Poland, you have South Korea, and Japan. Poland, I believe, have only recently acquired C-130s over the past 10-20 years or so. Their military has been purchasing more Western equipment as their Soviet-era equipment gets older and less serviceable. The South Korean option here, this looks fairly interesting. However, I did look at some reference photos, and unfortunately, the colors on the real aircraft aren't quite as vibrant as they make it out on this sheet here, but nonetheless gives you a slightly different option as opposed to just overall grey. And then of course here, you've got Japan. Bit of a rare paint scheme, this one. I haven't found that many photos of it, but this looks fairly interesting nonetheless. And then on the back, you have the RAF version. Now, as an Australian, I would have preferred to have some Australian decals in here, but when you think about it, the C-130 Hercules has served in 50 air forces or something like that, and I realized not having Australian decals is a pretty minor thing to complain about. There are always aftermarket options available, so honestly, I think that the 5 countries that they cover in here are pretty good options. The decals themselves, these look quite good, very crisp, very well printed. Despite the fact that the American version is just grey overall, you've still got some interesting stuff going on here. You got the Indian warrior chiefs there, the American flags, even the Polish version, which is grey all over. You've still got some pretty big roundels here just to make it a bit more interesting. And now onto the stencils. One slight problem I have, and look, granted it is quite difficult to get around this, but when you're dealing with stencils this big, there is a lot of carrier film to deal with here, and that can show through when you put this entire decal on the surface. Personally, what I would have liked to see is these black lines here just done as individual decals. I know it makes it a bit more difficult to deal with, but it just means that that carrier film in the middle there doesn't become a problem when you're trying to paint your final clear coat over the model. Just sometimes the carrier film can show through. That being said, you don't have to use these decals. What you can do if you're feeling a bit more adventurous is you can use masking tape and just put them on by painting. And when I build this thing, I honestly think that's what I'm going to do. However, the insignia down here, they look very well printed. One other disadvantage about having stencils like this is in transport, sometimes they can get a bit damaged. Clearly, a tiny bit of that decal got ripped off. Overall, I think this is quite a nice kit. Not mind-blowingly amazing, of course. It does have its small problems here and there, but compared to its competition, it is an absolutely fantastic kit. So, what is its competition? Well, as far as I can tell, there are 3 other 1/72 scale C130 kits, although these have been licensed under many different brand names. These 3 are originally from Airfix, AMT Ertl, and Italeri. Of these 3, I've read that the Italeri one is the best offering, and in fact, this is the only one that I've had experience with. Unfortunately, I can't show you any footage of it right now because I threw it out a week ago along with the SU30KN. Look, in my defense, I am moving house soon, and I decided to throw out all my unfinished kits that I knew I was just never going to finish. In saying that, the Italeri kit isn't bad, it's just outdated. It features raised panel lines, which were absolutely painful to deal with when gluing the fuselage halves together, and the interior detail was a bit sparse. Now, as we saw with the Zvezda kit, the interior was actually fairly well detailed, which will make opening up the cargo doors a lot more appealing. Also, the combination of the recessed panel lines and that single piece for the mid-wing section indicate to me that this will be much easier to put together. One area where I feel the Zvezda kit isn't that much an improvement over the Italeri is in the decals. The Italeri kit that I purchased contains decals for 6 countries, including Australia. Yes, the Zvezda decals are of slightly better quality, but you only get 5 options. So, is this the greatest 1/72 scale kit ever made? No. Fairly decent, but not the best. However, when you compare it to what's already on the market, it absolutely blows the competition out of the water. Thanks for watching this quick little video that I've put together. I know it has been a while since I last uploaded something. Rest assured, when I do get around to building the C130, I will be doing a video series of it. And once again, thanks for watching.